The engines of Elias's spacecraft hummed steadily as he sat in the cockpit, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The only other sound was the soft beeping of his instruments, a monotonous rhythm that had accompanied him over the past 2 years. His mission was clear: find a new world to save Earth. A planet rich in resources, capable of restoring his dying home. Earth had been teetering on the edge of collapse for too long. Desperate measures were taken as governments united across borders to combat environmental devastation. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, but time was running out. Elias, a seasoned astronaut with expertise in environmental science, had been selected for this critical mission: to venture beyond known space in search of a planet that could sustain human life. As he navigated through the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, Elias often found himself lost in thought. He thought about Earth, its once lush forests, sprawling oceans, and bustling cities, all of which were now in irreversible decline. He thought about the people, the children he would never meet, and the grandchildren who would never see the world as he had known it. 2 years had passed since his launch, and now, as his ship approached its target coordinates, a spark of hope ignited within him. The planet ahead looked promising. Dense jungles, untouched wildlife, and a thriving ecosystem, everything necessary to support human life. His spacecraft's scanners confirmed the data. This planet had the potential to save Earth. Elias brought the ship down carefully, landing in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. Stepping outside, he felt the moist air of the jungle embrace him, the rich aroma of vegetation filling his lungs. The landscape was alive with vibrant colors: alien flowers blooming underfoot, massive plants reaching for the sky, and distant noises from unseen creatures moving through the undergrowth. The mission had become more than just a scientific endeavor. It was about hope. Elias began his work, collecting plant samples and analyzing the soil and air. Each discovery bolstered his optimism. The planet appeared perfect, teeming with life and offering everything Earth needed. Though there were no signs of intelligent life, the abundance of flora and fauna was enough. Elias was certain he had found humanity's salvation. As night fell, the jungle's temperature dropped and its sounds intensified. The calls of unseen creatures echoed through the air, and the rustling of leaves hinted at movement in the dense vegetation. Elias set up a small campfire, feeling a rare moment of peace as he watched the flames flicker. But as the night deepened, something unusual occurred. The comforting sounds of the jungle began to shift. The insects fell silent. The rustling in the underbrush ceased. For the first time since his arrival, the jungle was utterly still. Elias glanced around, confused. Was it normal for the wildlife to retreat so suddenly? He remembered reading that some animals responded to threats this way, but this felt different. He scanned the horizon for any sign of a storm, but the skies remained calm. A gnawing unease settled over him. His hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, a tool for defending against hostile wildlife. But it wasn't the animals that unnerved him now. It was the feeling of being watched. The silence pressed down on him, oppressive and unnatural. Elias stirred the fire, though the crackling logs seemed jarringly out of place in the eerie quiet. His instincts screamed at him to stay alert. He had heard tales of strange occurrences on newly discovered worlds, galaxies teeming with life beyond human understanding. Perhaps this planet wasn't as empty as it seemed. He strained his ears, hoping for any sound to break the stillness. Nothing. Even the wind had died. The trees stood motionless, the jungle frozen in time. His eyes darted to the edges of the clearing, scanning the shadows just beyond the firelight. And then he saw them. Faces. Faint, glowing faces. They hovered at the edge of his vision, moving slowly, deliberately. Their eyes glimmered in the dim light of the fire. Elias's heart skipped a beat. Who were they? Humans? Aliens? A new species? His breath hitched as he grabbed his weapon, his hands trembling. Should he approach? Stay put? The faces didn't seem hostile, but their otherworldly appearance sent a chill down his spine. Stepping back cautiously, he called out in the universal tongue, the only language designed to bridge communication with intelligent life. "Are you peaceful? Do you mean harm?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite his pounding heart. The faces didn't answer immediately. They lingered in the shadows, watching. Then, one by one, they began to step forward. Elias gasped as they emerged. They were women, tall, elegant, and exuding an air of serene power. Their skin shimmered in a brilliant shade of blue, their glowing eyes softly illuminated by the firelight. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, breathtaking and alien. The tallest among them approached first, standing at least 7 feet tall. Her lithe, muscular form moved with a grace that made Elias's pulse race. She gazed at him with a piercing intensity. Without thinking, he let the weapon slip from his hands. It felt heavy, unnecessary. Violence seemed absurd in the presence of these beings. "Who are you? What do you want?" Elias stammered, his voice shaking. The woman's voice was soft but commanding as she spoke. "We are the last of our kind, a dying people. We need a leader, someone strong enough to save us, someone who can help us reproduce so our species does not vanish." Elias froze, the gravity of her words crashing over him. They were asking for something beyond comprehension, a request that defied every expectation he'd had about this journey. This situation seemed impossible to fathom, yet in that moment, Elias realized these women weren't merely asking for his help. They were pleading. They explained that their species, once prosperous on this planet, had seen its numbers dwindle over generations. Now, no males remained. Without a male to ensure their survival, their kind was doomed to extinction. Desperate and without a leader, they turned to him. "You're the only one who can help us." One woman said with quiet determination, "You must become our leader. You must help us continue our people. It is the only way." Elias stood frozen, unable to speak, his thoughts spiraling as he absorbed the weight of their words. They needed him, not just as a leader, but to father their future. Why him? He was just an ordinary man, one among billions. What made him special? I don't know," he stammered, his voice barely audible. The woman's gaze softened, as though she understood his hesitation. "If you refuse," she said gravely, "we will have no choice but to end your life. You are our last hope. Please, do not make us choose." Elias's breath hitched. The choice was stark: refuse and die, or agree and become their savior. He felt the crushing weight of their plea. Slowly, he nodded, his voice trembling as he replied, "All right, I will help you. I will be your leader." The women's expressions brightened with relief, their luminous eyes reflecting gratitude. A strange calm washed over Elias. In that moment, he had accepted his role, not just as their leader, but as the key to their survival. He was their hope, their salvation, and in return, they would make him their king. The air around them seemed charged, as though the very atmosphere had shifted with his decision. The women, striking in their beauty and presence, surrounded him with warmth. There was no hostility in their eyes now, only a profound sense of relief. It felt as if they had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now balance had been restored. The first woman, who appeared to lead the group, stepped forward and extended her hand. "Come with us," she said, her voice carrying a musical lilt. "We have much to prepare." Without another word, she turned and began walking through the jungle, the others following in her wake. Elias took a deep breath and followed, his heart heavy with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The jungle around him was unlike anything he had ever seen, alien and mesmerizing. Some of the plants glowed softly in the dark, while others seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Strange creatures lurked in the shadows, their eyes reflecting the light of his campfire as they observed him silently. Elias knew that his life had been irreversibly altered. The journey ahead would define not only his future, but the future of an entire species. Cautiously, Elias followed the women deeper into the jungle. Despite their tall, powerful forms, they moved with complete ease, as though the forest had been their home for centuries. The dense foliage seemed to part for them as if it recognized their presence. As they ventured further, Elias began to notice subtle details about their appearance. They were strikingly beautiful, their skin ranging in shades of blue and green, each adorned with unique markings. Some bore intricate patterns across their faces, while others had vivid tattoos decorating their arms and necks. Their glowing eyes and tall, graceful frames radiated strength and elegance. Yet their aura made Elias feel both awestruck and deeply uneasy. Finally, they reached a clearing, a vast natural amphitheater, unlike anything Elias had ever seen. The ground was level and smooth, encircled by towering stone pillars, remnants of an ancient structure long forgotten. The women gathered in a circle, and the one he had come to think of as their matriarch turned to him, her gaze steady. You have made the right decision, she said, her voice imbued with quiet authority. Now it is time to begin. Elias stood at the center of the circle, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had agreed to become their leader, but the enormity of what that entailed was only now beginning to dawn on him. What did they truly expect of him? He felt a rush of nerves. Turning back was no longer an option. These women, these mysterious beings from another world, were depending on him. The matriarch stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her touch was reassuring, her voice softening as she spoke. You must understand, she began. Our people were once mighty, but we have been without leadership for too long. Without a male, we cannot continue our race. You will help us, not just as a man, but as the father of our future. Elias swallowed hard as the enormity of her words sank in. He wasn't just an explorer or a savior for a dying world. He was now integral to the survival of an entire species. Do you understand what this means? The matriarch asked, her eyes locking onto his. You will be our king. Your blood will carry the future of our people. You will mate with us, and together we will bear children, each generation stronger than the last. He struggled to find words. This wasn't something he had been trained for, something he could have ever prepared for. His mission had been simple. Find a new world, save Earth. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. I understand, he finally said, his voice wavering with uncertainty. Despite his fear, he knew there was no other choice. Earth was beyond saving, but here, amidst the stillness of this alien jungle, he had discovered something worth preserving. The matriarch's expression softened into a smile. Good, she said. Then we begin. They led him to a small hut just beyond the clearing. Made of woven leaves and vines, it blended seamlessly into the surrounding jungle. Inside, the air was thick with the sweet, earthy aroma of incense, which seemed to calm Elias's racing heart. The matriarch gestured for him to sit. The women encircled him, their glowing eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. One among them, a younger woman with darker green skin and long, flowing hair, approached him first. She smiled shyly, her demeanor gentle yet confident. Before kneeling at his feet, she whispered, You will be our leader, Elias. We have all waited for you. Her voice was soft, almost reverent, and Elias felt a strange sensation stir within him. These women, all so beautiful and powerful, were now looking to him as their king. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He had come to find plants that could save Earth, but now he was about to lead a species into the future. His heart beat faster at the weight of that responsibility. The matriarch placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, bringing his attention back to her. Do you feel it? She asked, her voice low and soothing. Do you understand the bond we share? Elias nodded, though his mind was still racing. The bond they spoke of was more than physical. It was spiritual. He could feel the connection growing, like an invisible thread that tied him to each of the women around him. They needed him, and he felt the pull to help them, to fulfill his role as their savior. The matriarch looked at him with a knowing expression, then stepped back, allowing the younger woman to take her place. You must start with one of us, she said. Our people's future depends on this moment. Elias took a deep breath. He had no choice. This was his destiny now, whether he wanted it or not. He stood there, his heart pounding as the young woman moved closer. Her green skin glimmered softly under the dim light, and her long hair cascaded like silk around her shoulders. She was stunning, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Elias could feel the weight of the moment, the enormity of what was about to unfold. He was no longer just an explorer, no longer a man from Earth. He was about to become a key figure in the survival of an alien species. The women around him watched in silence, their eyes filled with anticipation. The matriarch had already explained the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about reproduction. It was about saving a people, a race. The pressure was immense, but there was also a strange comfort in their calmness, a reassurance that they were as ready for this as he was. The young woman reached out her hand, trembling slightly as it brushed against Elias's arm. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and reverence. I am ready, she whispered, her voice soft but filled with purpose. Elias swallowed hard, his breath catching in his throat. He had been in countless high-stress situations before, space missions, environmental crises, But this was different. This was something deeper, something primal. He had been thrust into a role he had never expected to play. But as he gazed into the young woman's eyes, he saw something. Hope. She wasn't just a stranger, a creature from another world. She was a person, a being with her own thoughts, her own fears, her own desires. And now she was entrusting him with the future of her people. He took a step closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. The moment felt surreal, as though everything that had led up to this was a dream, and now he was living in its conclusion. "I will help you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with a strange mix of awe and determination. The woman smiled softly, and in that smile, Elias saw the weight of the future they were about to share. Of their shared fate, she was no longer just a stranger. She was part of something greater, something that transcended the boundaries of species and worlds. In a way, she was now his responsibility, and he would not fail her. Without another word, the young woman lowered herself before him, her hands gently unfastening his clothing. Though nervous, Elias did not pull away. There was no time for hesitation. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. As they embraced, Elias felt the shift, the connection between them growing stronger. The weight of their future together settled on his shoulders, but for the first time since arriving on this planet, he did not feel alone. They were in this together, bound by something far greater than just their biology. Together, they were creating a future. The night stretched on, the stars above flickering softly in the vast sky as Elias and the young woman lay together, wrapped in the warmth of their union. The women of the tribe gathered around them, a soft hum of approval rising from the crowd. Their eyes were filled with understanding, as if this moment had been foretold in their ancient traditions. The matriarch smiled quietly, watching the scene unfold with a quiet sense of pride. Elias could feel the weight of what had just transpired. This was not just about fulfilling a biological need. This was a sacred act, a ritual passed down through generations. The act of reproduction was revered as it carried the future of their entire species. He was no longer just a man. He had become their leader, their savior. As the young woman rested her head against his chest, her breathing slow and steady, Elias felt a sense of fulfillment he had not expected. This was more than just a mission. This was a new life, a new world, and he was a part of it. He had saved them, yes, but they had also given him something he had not realized he needed: purpose. The matriarch approached, her gaze kind and understanding. "The first step has been taken," she said, her voice soft yet filled with deep wisdom. "Our future has begun." Elias nodded, his eyes still focused on the young woman in his arms. "I won't fail you," he promised, though the words felt almost hollow compared to the reality of what they had just done. The women began to chant softly, their voices rising in unison as the ritual continued. They spoke in a language Elias didn't fully understand, but he could feel the power in their words, as if the land itself was responding to their call. The air thickened with energy. The fire that burned in the center of the clearing flickered and danced, casting long shadows across the trees. The jungle around them seemed to come alive, as if it, too, was part of the ceremony. As the night deepened, the women slowly began to disperse, each returning to their homes and duties. But Elias remained where he was, his heart racing with the weight of what had just happened. The young woman beside him stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled softly at him, her face glowing with contentment. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for giving us life." Elias smiled back, though his mind was still racing with the implications of his decision. He had come to this planet with the hope of saving Earth, but now he found himself in a situation far more complex. Before kneeling at his feet, she whispered, "You will be our leader, Elias. We have all waited for you." Her voice was soft, almost reverent, and Elias felt a strange sensation stir within him. These women, all so beautiful and powerful, were now looking to him as their king. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He had come to find plants that could save Earth, but now he was about to lead a species into the future. His heart beat faster at the weight of that responsibility. The matriarch placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, bringing his attention back to her. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice low and soothing. "Do you understand the bond we share?" Elias nodded, though his mind was still racing. The bond they spoke of was more than physical. It was spiritual. He could feel the connection growing, like an invisible thread that tied him to each of the women around him. They needed him, and he felt the pull to help them, to fulfill his role as their savior. The matriarch looked at him with a knowing expression, then stepped back, allowing the younger woman to take her place. "You must start with one of us," she said. "Our people's future depends on this moment." Elias took a deep breath. He had no choice. This was his destiny now, whether he wanted it or not. He stood there, his heart pounding as the young woman moved closer. Her green skin glimmered softly under the dim light, and her long hair cascaded like silk around her shoulders. She was stunning, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Elias could feel the weight of the moment, the enormity of what was about to unfold. He was no longer just an explorer, no longer a man from Earth. He was about to become a key figure in the survival of an alien species. The women around him watched in silence, their eyes filled with anticipation. The matriarch had already explained the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about reproduction. It was about saving a people, a race. The pressure was immense, but there was also a strange comfort in their calmness, a reassurance that they were as ready for this as he was. The young woman reached out her hand, trembling slightly as it brushed against Elias's arm. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and reverence. "I am ready," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with purpose. Elias swallowed hard, his breath catching in his throat. He had been in countless high-stress situations before, space missions, environmental crises, but this was different. This was something deeper, something primal. He had been thrust into a role he had never expected to play. But as he gazed into the young woman's eyes, he saw something. Hope. She wasn't just a stranger, a creature from another world. She was a person, a being with her own thoughts, her own fears, her own desires. And now she was entrusting him with the future of her people. He took a step closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. The moment felt surreal, as though everything that had led up to this was a dream, and now he was living in its conclusion. "I will help you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with a strange mix of awe and determination. The woman smiled softly, and in that smile, Elias saw the weight of the future they were about to share. With new methods of planting crops and organizing their resources, Elias had brought with him the seeds of several plants from Earth, plants that could nourish the village, and they began to flourish in the fertile soil of the alien planet. But it wasn't just the physical progress that Elias noticed. There was a change in the women as well. They had become more confident, more self-assured. Their interactions with Elias had shifted from necessity to genuine affection. He had been their savior, yes, but now they saw him not only as their leader, but as a partner. They regarded him as an equal, a companion in the birth of their species. One evening, as the village gathered around the fire, the matriarch approached Elias, her expression soft but serious. "You have done what no one else could," she said, her voice carrying the weight of gratitude. "You have given us hope when all seemed lost." Elias nodded, feeling the sting of pride mixed with a quiet sense of humility. He had never expected this, never expected to be revered, to be at the center of a new life. But here, surrounded by these women, he understood. They weren't just looking to him to save them. They had made him part of something larger than himself. "We have always known we would survive," the matriarch continued, her eyes meeting his. "But now, thanks to you, we will thrive." Elias smiled, though a part of him still felt the pull of the world he had left behind. Earth was still there, still struggling, but this place, this world, was where he belonged now. He had become a father, a leader, a protector, and in that role, he had found a purpose he had never imagined. Months passed, and Elias found himself not just living among these women, but becoming one with them. The tribe had changed in profound ways, and so had he. His relationship with the women had deepened, evolving beyond mere physical connection. They were no longer just his subjects, or the ones he had come to help. They were his family. There was one woman in particular who had captured his heart more than the others. She was the first one he had been with, the one who had looked at him with such hope when he had agreed to stay and lead. Her name was Lyra, and her beauty was unmatched, even among the stunning women of the tribe. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that captivated him. It was her strength, her intellect, and the way she carried herself. She had been a leader in the village long before he arrived, and she had taught him much about their culture, their language, and their spiritual practices. As Elias spent more time with Lyra, their bond deepened. Their relationship was no longer just a matter of duty or necessity. It was love. He had come to realize that, despite the unlikeliness of the situation, he had found something he had never experienced on Earth. He had found a partner, someone who understood him in ways he hadn't known he needed. In Lyra, he saw the future of their people, strong, capable, and full of potential. One night, as they sat together by the fire, Elias took her hand, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. "I never thought I'd find something like this," he said softly. Lyra smiled, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "Neither did I," she replied, "but we have." Elias had found something worth fighting for, something worth living for. Her words echoed in his mind. He had left Earth in search of a way to save it, but instead, he had discovered a new world. A world where he wasn't just a visitor, but an essential part of its future. He had found love, a sense of belonging, and a people who needed him, not just for survival, but for a fresh start. The days turned into years, and Elias's life on this planet became one of purpose and fulfillment. The village continued to grow, both in numbers and strength. The children of Elias, now flourishing in their youth, were raised with an understanding of both their alien heritage and the wisdom Elias had brought from Earth. They were a unique blend of both worlds, and as they matured, it became clear that they would one day take up the mantle of leadership, just as he had. Elias had become a true leader, not only because of his role in their reproduction, but because he had learned to understand their ways, their culture, and their needs. He had learned to respect the land and its resources, and to live in harmony with it. The women no longer looked to him solely for survival, but for guidance on how to build a sustainable future. Over time, the relationship between Elias and the women had evolved. They had become a real family, bound not just by biology, but by shared experiences. Each woman, each child, played a role in their thriving society. The matriarch, now growing older, had passed many of her responsibilities on to Elias and Lyra. But she remained a guiding presence in their lives, offering her wisdom whenever it was needed. As the years passed, Elias began to realize that he had become more than just a leader. He was a father to the children, a partner to Lyra, and a member of a family, one that spanned generations, united by a common goal: survival and prosperity. However, even as he embraced this new life, a small part of him still wondered about Earth. He had come here to find a solution for his dying planet, and though he had discovered a new world and purpose, he couldn't forget the people he had left behind. But that was a thought for another time. For now, his focus was on the women and children, on the future of this planet that had become his home. As he looked out over the village, his heart swelled with pride. The future of this world, of this people, was in his hands, and he would ensure that it thrived as long as the stars themselves shone in the sky.